So then, welcome back everyone to Race Review. It feels fresh. We are back. It's been ages, it's been 2 weeks since the last race review, but a week since the last video? That's a long time for us on this channel. It's been really dry at the moment. I've been so busy with exams, but it's a week off at the moment, then the week after that I've got no exams, then 2 more weeks after that of exams, and then I'm done for the summer, and we can get back to usual. But the next 2 weeks, including this week, we can crack on as usual. So this weekend, the Monaco Grand Prix. Let's start off with a quickie preview then. What's happened in the world of Formula 1? What happened in the build-up for the Monaco Grand Prix? Quick disclaimer, spoilers ahead as always, so if you haven't seen the race, do not watch this video. Just thought I'd mention that just to be uber sure that none of you guys is going to be spoiled for you today. So, coming into the weekend, Red Bull looked like they had the pace to secure the first 1-2 for them of the season. And Red Bull, they have definitely not looked the top team this season. So for them, this was a must win. And throughout the first practice, second practice, third practice, they were the quickest guys by a country mile. Smashed every single session and really let the team to beat. And it looked like Ferrari and Mercedes needed an absolute miracle to be able to get a car on the podium, to be perfectly honest with you, especially Mercedes. It looked almost impossible for them to get a car on the podium, and then it happened. 7 minutes to go in the final practice session. Max Verstappen gets it wrong on the exit of the swimming pool, hits the inside Armco barrier, then crosses the curb, flips his car up in the air, and bang, straight into the barrier again. Now, that was pretty much an over-exaggeration, but it was still a monster crash. Consequently, that meant with only 2 hours till qualifying, they could not get his car fixed. Actually, tell a lie, they could, but discovered a gearbox issue at the same time. It seemed that crash had caused some sort of issue at the rear of the car as well, and so he couldn't get out for qualifying, and Verstappen would start the race dead last. What a blow for Max. That's now 6 races into the season, 6 incidents. Not a great start to the season at all whatsoever. After the race, I just want to let you know, he's only 1 point ahead of Fernando Alonso. And Alonso didn't even finish this race, so that really puts into perspective what an awful season Verstappen's having, and question marks are starting to appear all over his resume at the moment. Not impressed with the Dutchman as of yet. Even despite a podium last time out in Spain, this was his chance for his first win of the season, so he's going to be gutted more than anyone else in the world, I imagine. But I know we've got a lot of Dutch fans at the moment, so I'd love to know what you think about Max so far this season. Has he just been unlucky? You know, that can sometimes happen. There's a picture of Grosjean on the screen. He's been a little bit unlucky, also a little bit reckless this season. So Max really robbed us a little bit of a really fantastic qualifying and a bit of a race as well. He could have really spiced up the race. But anyway, let's move on to that quali result. And with Verstappen out, only left one man for the pole position, and that was Daniel Ricciardo. Hamilton had a chance of getting on the front row, but was consequently just outpaced by the Ferrari of Sebastian Vettel. Raikkonen would be 4th and Bottas 5th. Other notable mentions in qualifying: Ocon, a season best 6th. That was great for the Frenchman. Been a little bit lacklustre this season, to be perfectly honest with you. I haven't seen too much great things from Ocon. Quite far behind in the points from Perez. Obviously, it's a dodgy Force India car this year, but Ocon, this is what he needs, a good bit of form now. Monaco Grand Prix this weekend, then the French Grand Prix in a couple of races' time, so it's a great time for him to kick into some form. Also, Sergei Sorokin, I believe it was P13 in qualifying, in the Williams. That's a fantastic effort from the Russian. Now, just so you know as well, this is a track that we have seen Williams struggle on for the past, 2 or 3 years. They've been nowhere in this track. Even in 2014, when they were right up there fighting for that, not necessarily World Championship, but the top ends for that Constructors' Championship, they struggled in Monaco. So this was the best qualifying result they've had, I'm pretty sure, since the hybrid era. So a fantastic effort there for Sergei Sorokin. Lance Stroll, not so much. And also the Haas cars, absolutely nowhere. Kevin Magnussen didn't even get out Q1. He was P19, dead last on the road, apart from Max Verstappen. Grosjean did manage to get into Q2 but was dead last in Q2 P15, and with his penalty from Spain he lined up in 18th, still ahead of Magnussen, so really a not great weekend at all for those guys. But let's move on to the race then, and I just want to let you guys know, I did mention it a little bit at the end of the Spanish Grand Prix review, I was really looking forward to this race, and I don't know why. I've always sort of had this thing about Monaco that I'm not really a huge fan of it. It's a lot of fuss over nothing. But this year, for whatever reason, I was really looking forward to it. I hope something would happen, something to spice. And you know what? What we've seen in this 2018 season, I was hoping we'd have a great race. And so, started this morning, started actually yesterday in qualifying. I thought, oh, this is going to be fantastic. It's really shaping up to be a great race. And personally, I was really happy with the race. I did enjoy it. And I can already tell that's probably going to get a few of you guys backs up. I can tell that. Because Monaco is synonymous for 0 overtakes. Maybe an odd massive crash here or there. A couple of safety cars. But it's pretty much synonymous, really, especially for hardcore fans, for knowing it's a boring race, to be perfectly honest with you. So, I don't know why I was in this different mood this year, but I was really looking forward to it. I was really happy with the outcome. I really enjoyed this race, and it might be one of my favourites of the season. I don't really know why, like I say, because we didn't see all the crazy overtakes or anything like that, but for the first year, I really understood the spectacle of Monaco. I really did. And, you know, I'm not an idiot. I understand the glitz and glamour of Monaco. But this year, just for some reason, something clicked in my head. And I could really appreciate it. And so, yeah, for me, I don't want to lie to you guys. Maybe I'm a bit of tainted vision this weekend a little bit. But I really did enjoy it. And for me, it was much more enjoyable than the Spanish Grand Prix, much more enjoyable than the Australian Grand Prix, probably around about the Bahrain Grand Prix, in my personal opinion, those sort of levels. And obviously, I will explain that as we go through the review. But let's start off then with the beginning of the race. Ricciardo pretty much held position, and to be perfectly honest with you, wasn't any huge incidents, which let's be honest, that's pretty weird for Monaco. Expecting some sort of massive crash at the lower end of the grid, but no, absolutely nothing. A few argy-bargy between the Haas drivers. We've not seen any footage of that, and so I imagine when F1 releases its best onboard footage, we'll see something there. I will put my money on that. A little squeeze from K-Mag, I'll imagine, so I'm definitely looking forward to seeing that. Also, Hartley had a bit of contact in lap 1 as well, but we didn't get to see that either, so pretty plain sailing. But moving all the way to the end of the race result, Daniel Ricciardo, P1. Let's go through his race then. And great start, like I said, was the third man to pit out of that top group. It was Hamilton the first to blink. Vettel then came in to cover off Hamilton, and then Ricciardo, consequently, who was in the lead at the time, had to cover off them both. Came out in first place, and this was around the low 20s. Then we had the blow, the devastating blow on lap 28, that Daniel Ricciardo had an MGUK issue. Now, this costs around 150 brake horsepower, which amounts to about 2 seconds a lap disadvantage. And he still, that was lap 28, there were 78 laps, 50 laps of a 2-second disadvantage. To put this into perspective, this is pretty much, I don't know, a manner from last year sort of pace leading the race against a Ferrari, one of the best cars on the grid. It was monstrous, the pace deficit between those two cars, and because it was an MGUK failure, that means fuel management, extra tyre management, battery management, and he did it sublimely. Vettel, to be fair, didn't pressurise him as much as I would imagine. We all sort of thought that it was building, which, to be honest, is why I love this race, because we knew we had a wounded guy at the front, 4 times world champion behind, and really we had that top 5 within around 5 seconds of each other for most of the Grand Prix, which we haven't seen all year. And in Monaco, the fact that they're so close, and one wrong move could be the end of the race and could have been a huge pile-up of the top 5. It really easily could have been that. Really kept me on my seat, and I don't know if it did for you guys, but for me, that really hyped up the drama in today's race. And so that was fantastic to see, and knowing that Ricciardo was wounded made it even better. Even though I wanted Ricciardo to win, just made it a little bit extra spicy, and that extra pace that Red Bull had all weekend was gone. And it seemed to be that Lady Luck had not been on Ricciardo's side once again, but he said no to Lady Luck this year. He said, no, screw you, I'm still going to do this. And he monstered this race, and that's one of the best drives I think most of us have ever seen Ricciardo do. It was incredible to watch, it truly was. On the other side of the garage, Max Verstappen started dead last, went on a bit of a charge, didn't he? Passing the two Haas cars before we got to turn 1. Lance Stroll, he'd pretty much gone by, I think it was lap 8, he got him out of the way. Verstappen then decided to go for a long stint. Now, a few of the guys in the grid decided to do a longer stint, and that really seemed to work for them today. All of the drivers who went much longer into the race to do their first stop, they generally had a better result compared to where they qualified, and the opposite happened to the guys who pitted first. Except the top 5, they're the anomaly in that sort of idea. But Verstappen, great drive from him, managed to get all the way up into P9. He had some great squabbling around halfway through the race with Carlos Sainz. Few off-track excursions down at the chicane. I mean, bit of 51, half a dozen of the other sort of thing. Can't really blame either of them. The first one, Verstappen went up the inside, forced Carlos wide, to be perfectly honest with you. And although on Sky they did say that Carlos should have given the position back, I didn't think so. Carlos pretty much had nowhere to go. And that, I think we all know that chicane is a bit of a dog to go round, to be perfectly honest with you. That's so difficult. Then the following lap, Verstappen went round the outside. He then cut the chicane a little bit, but managed to get it back on track, block Carlos. It's a bit messy, really, but that's the nature of Monaco, and especially that chicane where overtaking gets desperate, and that's one of the only key places to do it. That's what's going to happen, and so the stewards decided no further action would be taken there. And so Verstappen after that really just had a race catching up with Hülkenberg, Gasly, Ocon. They sort of ended up in the same sort of area, those guys. Really close, and it was great to see the different manufacturers all in there, and Alonso was in that group as well. So we've read a clear visual representation in this race of the midfield and the front runners, because even the likes of Leclerc, he was sort of pushed in that group at some stages. The only team really that seemed, well, two teams that were just nowhere this weekend were Haas and even Williams, and Williams, we'll move on to them later. Half of that was their own doing, rather than the drivers' doing, except one of the drivers probably was my worst driver of the day. I've never given that award out before, but yep, I think we know who that is. And I'll be coming on to him a little bit later. But Max Verstappen, P9 in the end, and that's pretty solid damage limitation from the Dutchman. There he is right now, not looking too happy, but I'm pretty sure he'll be alright with that. I think it doesn't look great, his finishes this season. Only one podium so far, and then I think apart from that, his best finish was P5, I think it was, in Australia, P6, so he won't be too happy with that, I am sure. Moving on to the second best team today, that was Ferrari. Now, they came into this weekend knowing pretty much they were second best team, and it probably expected a P3 and a P4, so to come away with a P2 and a P4, probably pretty happy with that. Quiet race for Kimi Räikkönen behind Hamilton, in front of Bottas, sort of stuck in that sandwich of not enough pace to catch and overtake Hamilton, too much pace to be overtaken by Bottas, so a very quiet weekend for Kimi. Vettel as well, he was the big player in today's race in terms of he had all the keys to change this result, and he couldn't do it. He couldn't pass Ricciardo, and like I mentioned, it seemed to be a midway through the race that he was saving his tyres, saving his fuel to do a big push at the end. But after that VCS, at the end of the race, it seemed to be Vettel couldn't get his tyres working, dropped back, I think it was about 5 or 6 seconds from Ricciardo, and then the race was lost. There are some reports saying Ricciardo managed to solve the issue with his engine during that VCS, so that also could be why Ricciardo got away, but Vettel, I think he'll be happy with P2. Like I said, with Verstappen out the equation, that was one of the top cars out the way, so he'll be happy with that, and closes the gap a little bit to Hamilton, but only by 3 points. Moving on to Mercedes then. Very quiet race for them as well. Hamilton P3, again Mercedes, they are probably expecting a P5 and P6 this weekend, so P3 and P5, they won't be too disheartened by that, I am sure. For Mercedes, though, we came to Monaco knowing this wasn't their sort of circuit. It hasn't been for the past couple of years, and so to get on the podium, that's why when we've seen Hamilton, he seemed happier today than he did when he won in Azerbaijan. So puts into perspective what they sort of expected today, and it wasn't a podium, so I'm sure he'll be happy with that. And to only lose 3 points to Vettel, I'm sure Hamilton, he'll be very content with that, let's be perfectly honest with you. Mercedes' pointers for this weekend is that, yes, they're not good at Monaco. Bottas seemed a little bit off pace this weekend. He's been fantastic this season. This weekend seemed to be a bit more like last season, the last season Bottas. So hopefully that was just a bit of a blip, and he'll be back to his usual self next weekend. Hamilton, a lot of complaining about tyre degradation. Great choice from them to keep him out, though. Really was. That could have screwed them over. I remember a couple of years ago when Hamilton was on for the win. Was it last year? No, it wasn't last year. It was a couple of years ago. 2015 was that? Hamilton was on for the win. They decided to bring him in for a tyre change. Cost him the race, to be honest with you. Cost him the race. And that's what they didn't want to do today. They didn't want to do the same thing, bring him in, swap those tyres, take him from a P3 down to a P5. And so he nursed them, he hung on, but it's not ideal for the world champions. And they'll be winning. I probably predict the 1-2 for them next time out in Canada, so they won't be too worried about this weekend. And a P3 and a P5 is good points considering the issues they have on this track. Moving on to the next best team, Force India. Ocon qualified P6, ended P6. Very quiet race from him. Again, like I said earlier, that's his best result of the season. He'll be happy with that. This was a good showing for Mercedes, especially letting Lewis Hamilton through after Hamilton pitted. So he'll be in their good books after this weekend, so he needs to keep this form going. Sergio Perez, on the other hand, qualified in the top 10, ended the race P12, and that was only because of the crash at the end between Hartley and Leclerc. Perez had an awful race, one of the worst races I've seen him do for a long time. He wasn't really focused on, so don't really know what happened with the Mexican, but just seemed to be nowhere in the race. That's Force India done, unfortunately. Not much for them, but P6, one of their best results of the season, slowly improving that car. So hopefully them as well, that in Canada, they can get a good result, but P6 they will take at the moment. And actually, as well, interestingly, it moves them ahead of Haas in the Constructors' Championship. Now Force India are in 6th, Haas are in 7th, and I think we're all aware that the Haas are probably the 4th best car on the grid, but they're just not converting these results. And we can look at Grosjean and say Grosjean's on 0 points, that's awful, and we know it is, but Magnussen is only on 19. So both need to up their game this season for sure. This weekend for them, though, it was always going to go wrong, so we'll move on to them very shortly, but that won't be a long segment for sure. The next team, Toro Rosso, came into the weekend hopeful that they could get a point scoring position, hopeful that they could get 2, to be perfectly honest with you. Didn't quite happen. Gasly P7, Hartley, really good throughout practice was Brendan Hartley. Qualifying, a bit of traffic out in Q1. He was gutted, and that's not what he needs at the moment. A lot of talk that by the time we end up in China for the next race, he will not be at Toro Rosso. And so he needed the result today, right on the edge of points, and then the incident, the crash, the only big crash of the day, with Charles Leclerc fighting for arguably the final point. Hartley was P11, Leclerc was P12, but they were catching Sainz. Leclerc right behind Hartley, brake failed, down into the chicane. Leclerc did all he could to get out of the way, even turning into the barrier to try and limit the damage as best he could, but he couldn't do enough. Right into the back of Hartley's rear wing. Race done for both of them. And for Leclerc, I actually think he had a really good race in that Sauber. They came this weekend knowing this would be a horrendous track for them, and so running P12 was great. How he handled the crash as well, a brake failure, was quite impressive, to be perfectly honest with you. On Sky, they didn't really mention it too much, but on Channel 4, they were saying how he did use that barrier. Obviously, Coulthard and Webber, ex-race winners in Monaco, they were explaining how Leclerc turns towards the barrier to slow the car down as best he can. He tries to move out of the way, And they were saying how in that split second, such a young age, to be thinking like that proves his talent. And it's something I personally didn't pick up on when I first saw the crash. But I thought, you know what, that's so true. And like I say, Leclerc, in my opinion, did have a really solid weekend and was so unlucky with that brake failure. His first real incident in Formula 1 in terms of a cheeky crash like that. First failure in Formula 1 as well, his first DNF. So lots to learn from him today, but I think it hurts Hartley more because it's another non-points finish. So it wouldn't surprise me in Canada if we didn't see Pascal Wehrlein. I know he's doing DTM, and a few of you guys did say this in one of my recent videos about Pascal Wehrlein. I know he's in DTM, but I can see him coming out of DTM to do Formula 1. I really can, and I know he's signed up for the season, but I'm sure an arrangement can be done. I'm sure, because Pascal Wehrlein, as you guys know, is a world-class driver. He's up there for me. He's better than half the grid in Formula 1 in my personal opinion. He should be there. Doesn't matter if it's for Toro Rosso, doesn't matter if it's for Manor or whoever. I know Manor aren't in Formula 1, but you know what I'm saying. Doesn't matter who he's with, he should be in Formula 1. So if he can go to Toro Rosso, puts Gasly under pressure, but Hartley, he's not performing, to be perfectly honest with you. I do think he deserves more of a chance, but it wouldn't surprise me if we didn't see Wehrlein in Canada. Moving on to Renault then, a double point score for them. Hülkenberg P8, Sainz P10. Didn't see much of them in the race, but Sainz, this was a perfect example of the pit stops today. Sainz was one of the earliest pitters, Hülkenberg was one of the latest, and Nico managed to get past Sainz due to a bit of a team order, but mainly just because his tyres were so much fresher and that late stop helped him out so much. But a quiet day for both of them, really. Sainz, like I said earlier, fighting with Verstappen. Sauber, the Leclerc DNF that we've already gone through. We've already gone through Leclerc's race. Ericsson, a quiet race from him. Had a bit of contact with Stroll running into the back of him early on. P11 for Marcus Ericsson, so he was only just outside the points in the end as well. Quiet weekend, outplaced by Leclerc for the third weekend in a row. Hasn't quite showed that form that we saw very early on, but what I really think it is not that Ericsson's gone off pace. I think it's more Leclerc's found his pace, to be perfectly honest with you. So P11 again for Ericsson. That's pretty much where he lives these days. The past few years, P11, P11, P11 all the time. So he'll probably be content with that, I'm sure. But a quiet weekend, as always. We then move on to Haas. Magnussen ended up P13, Grosjean P15. 100% a weekend to forget. The big issue for them was what they had on their car in practice. They had a lot of loose parts, and I know it sounds daft, but in other tracks, they've actually stayed on the car. But in practice, we were seeing parts of the Haas fall off the car, and so what the FIA had to do was say, hi guys, do you mind taking these bits off your car so they don't fall off in the race? And so that's what they did. They had to take off multiple parts, little winglets, from their car, and that appears to really have hurt their pace this weekend. Now, that was only for this weekend, but this could happen in other races. Singapore, for example, other street circuits, where if debris gets on the circuit, it can be difficult to retrieve, and so question marks really for Haas over that, and question marks just why they were so slow this weekend. Especially, I mean, Haas, for me, a lot of the midfield, each race we go to, they seem to be moving around, but Haas, they're either on it or not. That seems to be what's happening with their car this season, and so it's definitely interesting, the mix-up, and I'm sure in Canada they will be the fourth fastest team. I'd probably put my money on that, but it's not what they want. They need to be more consistent, and now they're in 7th in the championship, Constructors. That needs to be improved upon. That does need to be improved upon, so not great for them at all. McLaren, P14 and a DNF. What happened to them? They were fighting all weekend, looked like they were going to get 2 cars into Q3. Van Dorn missed out because of traffic and he was gutted, but he knew he had tyre choice. Alonso qualifying P7. Didn't do Monaco last year, so he was really up for it. Throughout the race, he was in P7, fighting with Ocon. Then had that issue with the engine, his first DNF of the season. He seemed quite happy, actually, that had taken 6 races for a DNF, which is an improvement on the past few seasons for them. But Van Dorn did pit later to try and help out Alonso earlier on in the race. So McLaren sort of screwed over Van Dorn's race to help Alonso, which was fair enough, try and get him up into P6. Unfortunately, when Alonso then DNF'd, Van Dorn, well, he was in no man's land. He was miles down. The only positive for Van Dorn is that as soon as the safety car came out, he was the only one to pit. He came out in front of Vettel and then was miles ahead of Vettel, stayed with Ricciardo. So a little bit of optimism for McLaren there and for Van Dorn. And as I have mentioned at the beginning of the season, that Van Dorn is one of my favourite drivers, but his performances this season have not backed that up, and so I'm slowly falling out of love with Van Dorn a little bit. I just want it known as well, I'm not being a fickle fan here. I don't really have a favourite driver like many. I was a big fan of Raikkonen when he was at Lotus, but when he left, that sort of that hurt me a little bit. So I was always a fan of teams, and so now I don't really know who I support. I do like McLaren. I like Renault. Sainz I'm a big fan of. Van Dorn I'm a big fan of. Grosjean as well. But Van Dorn and Grosjean, especially this season, have been poor. So both of those need to sort of turn around their fortunes and fast. We now move on to the final team, Williams. Jesus Christ! Can we just take a minute just to think? 12 months ago, Lance Stroll gets a podium for Williams. In that season, they have a front row in Monza. They're fighting for 4th and 5th in the Constructors, or 5th in the Constructors. This weekend, last place. They're so far behind everyone else. 4 points after 6 races. World Championship winning team. Williams, what are you doing? It hurts my head. It really does. And Paddy Lowe came to the team. This was going to be the season. They were going to take the fight to the top guys. The driver lineup is all wrong. The team is all wrong. The car is all wrong. They're losing Martini next season. Cool, they need a reset button. They really do. They just need a big red reset button smacked hard onto their team. But this weekend, there's a little bit of hope. And that came in the form of Sergei Sorokin. P13 in qualifying. What an effort that was. Incredible race on the Saturday. On the Sunday, before the race begins, Williams don't put on his tyres with the 3-minute warning. Means before the race has begun, he's got a 10-second penalty. What the hell is that? Williams, how can you do this? And then, to make matters worse, in the 10-second stop-go penalty, it was under investigation that they did work on the car, which could have resulted in another penalty. So Sorokin got screwed over by his team so much. And you're thinking to yourself, oh my God, it would be a miracle if he even finished in front of his teammate. Well, he did. He actually finished in front of Lance Stroll, who had 2 punchers this weekend. Made 3 stops in total. So did Sorokin, to be fair, but Sorokin, one of them obviously was because of the stop-go, and then that they sort of changed up his strategy a little bit to try and make it a little bit more interesting. But Stroll, no. He should not be in F1. I've defended him, but after this weekend, what a spoiled brat he was this weekend. It was horrible to see. It really was. Sorokin, he'd had a fantastic qualifying just thrown away. Didn't complain once, just got on with it. Lance Stroll in the other car, crying. Absolute cry pie this weekend. And like I say, I have defended Stroll, but saying stuff like, oh, why are we even racing? Oh, but what's the point in even taking part? That is not needed. That is so unprofessional when he's the one who's made all the mistakes. I could not believe that. He's going to be in so much trouble with the team. He's only there now because he's paid to be there, and I really hate saying that. But his performances this season, they've been okay, but maybe gone under the radar a little bit. You know, actually, I'm calming myself down now. He has had some good performances, but still not enough to be making comments like that. He does not have the respect or the talent to be making comments like that, if you know what I mean. You know, it's not like if it was Lewis Hamilton, who has the credentials, who's done it before, he's been there, done it. This is Lance Stroll, he's in his 2nd season. His 1st season pretty unimpressive. And he doesn't have that relationship with the team yet, in my opinion, to be saying things like that. It was horrible to hear, and Sorokin has gone up in my books this weekend because of it. And so Stroll, not impressed. Not impressed. I need to calm down, but yeah, really disappointed in Stroll this weekend. So we'll move on there and move on to a happier note. Let's move on to the driver of the day. You guys love this bit, and Ricciardo was the official driver of the day, and I'm going to agree with it. I'm going to agree that Daniel Ricciardo was the driver of the day for me. I'd also consider Charles Leclerc. I would once again, but obviously the DNF, not his fault, and no points, so I don't want to go crazy there. Max Verstappen, overtaken in Monaco, always great. Nico Hülkenberg as well, did a good effort, and so did Esteban Ocon. But Ricciardo, with all those issues, hats off to him, impressed with that. And let's move on to probably the most controversial thing about this this race review. There's always got to be something controversial in my videos, and let's move on to the race review, pretty much. What I think the race is out of 10, and we've had some solid races recently. No 10 out of 10s this season. This race for sure wasn't a 10 out of 10, but I think I'm going to give it a 7 out of 10. Just so you know as well, I gave Australia a 6, so I felt it was better than Australia. Bahrain, China, I think I gave an 8. Actually, Bahrain, China and Azerbaijan, I'm pretty sure I all gave them 9s actually. So we got a bit of wiggle room there, but 7, happy with that. Really enjoyed this race, and it was a great qualifying session to add on as well. And practice did spice up the race. Practice affected the race, and so hats off to the Monaco race for doing that. Obviously, the nature of the circuit, of course, so not really the events fault for that, but great weekend. I really enjoyed it, and the tension of not knowing who was going to win. That's how I base a Formula 1 race these days. Yes, it can be great for crashes. Yes, it can be a fantastic race in the midfield. But if you're on your seat the whole race, not having a clue who's going to win, someone hounding down the race win, going into the final few laps, still not having a clue, that's what makes a great F1 race, for me, personally. And stories up and down the grid, that's what I want to see, and that's what we had this weekend. Obviously, it wasn't a stellar race, and for Monaco, having a minor crash, I wanted to see a red flag, and a massive smash up, obviously, that's what we all want to see occasionally, but we only saw a little one, really. So, room for improvement, of course, and Ricciardo did win. If Ricciardo hadn't have won, and Bottas, who had been on the super softs, he had gone through and won, then I maybe would have given it a 9, but because the top 5 remained in their grid positions, you can't really go too extreme, and I'm sure some of you guys hated it because there was no overtaking, and I respect that, so don't want to go too crazy. 7 out of 10, race review done for the Monaco Grand Prix. Guys, as always, I want to know who your driver of the day was. Was it Ricciardo? Was it anyone else? I want to know your thoughts on the Monaco Grand Prix, but this week, guys, I should be back as always, so just want to mention, I am on Twitter, so if you've got any questions, go follow me over there. Also, might be, well, I want to know your questions as well for the weekly mailbox. We've not done that for a little while, but the weekly mailbox is the weekly Q&A coming this Wednesday. I might even do a live stream for that, so that should be all good fun as well. Tomorrow is Formula 1 Weekly. Tuesday should be a fun little F1 documentary that we've not done for a little while as well. Looking forward to that. Don't want to give away the story for that one just yet, but that should be fun. Wednesday, the Q&A. Thursday, the Formula E show. And a bit of an announcement as well about the future of this channel on Thursday. Friday, back to previewing the next weekend. So, good fun on this channel. Guys, thank you for being so patient. And to all you guys that have subscribed while I've been away, welcome. And thank you for watching today's video, guys. As always, hopefully you have enjoyed. I'll see you in the next one.